You understand the expectation of a Miami fan, particularly when the young man is from Miami, of course. So how do you talk to Duke about managing the expectations from the outside just because you know they're going to be sky high for him right away, or do you focus in on what this staff expects from him?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, we focus in on our expectations, you know. Because our expectation obviously is excellence in every game, obviously. So that's our main focus. We want to be, have him, as good of a football player as he possibly can.
Speaking of expectations and perceptions, all those other things that don't matter, except the inward stuff, of course. You know you're probably not going to be overwhelmingly picked real high and all those things. That doesn't matter because it's all one on the field anyway. But those people making those conclusions, do you think they're kind of shortchanging themselves because they didn't see a healthy Michael James last year, or not a fully healthy Michael James last year? And how much would that change things if they knew what he could really do as a workhorse back, if when he's physically right, like he is going into this year?
It's always about what have you done for me lately, and I know his ability and I know what he's capable of doing, and I think the biggest thing is as we begin to start the season, we have to do that, and he has to do it, and he has to prove it, and that's the bottom line. We're in the result-oriented business, so performance and results, and nobody wants to do anything else.
How hard is it for a kid, particularly an upperclassman, to go from a specialized role, if you will, like he had last year, to being the workhorse, being the feature guy?
If anybody can do it, it's him. I mean, he's very well conditioned. He's one around. He practices harder than anybody on the team. He's a great finisher. So as far as him having the condition and the physical ability to carry the load on defense that he can, so I'm not worried about it. It'll be an easy transition for him.
Some people are saying that pound for pound he might be the strongest guy right now on the roster. How nice what kind of a bonus is that for a position coach to have that guy?
You know what? The thing about it, it's a credit to him because he works at it. And he most likely he is. I don't have the numbers in front of me and to put him in the calculation. I think Andrew Swayze will handle that. But I would say that could be a fair statement.
Duke Johnson's a guy who's got a lot of buzz already, I guess. What do you think are realistic expectations for any freshman that comes in their first year here?
As much as he can handle, if he can handle it all, and he deserves play time, he'll get it. Does he have the ability? Yes. I think what we're charged with, between me and Duke, is for me teaching him all the things he needs to teach, and for him taking his ability and applying it on the field. That's where we're both charged with, and that's where our partnership, comes into play.
Terry, people always talk about things like quarterback controversy, not a competition, and running back controversy, not a competition. How much you guys as a staff just sort of embrace that when there isn't a predetermined, okay, you're the guy and everyone else is competing to be the backup? How much, for as much as the outside world grabs onto it as a bad thing, how much do you guys look at it?
I never really look at it that way because you want to have all your guys game ready. Injuries do happen, and you want to keep the competition going. Just because a guy is the number one guy the first week, he's got to maintain that standard and he can't fall off. But that other guy is still gunning, he can beat him out. I've had situations in my career where I've coached guys that were 2,000-yard rushers, a 2,000-yard rusher, and I had 2,000-yard rushers, and I had guys that 3 guys rush for 700 yards. So whatever formula you have to use in order to put the best product on the field, that's what you do. And it could be one guy starting maybe 5 games, and another guy coming on and you end up starting 6 games. So you do what you got to do in order to get the performance and keep the standard of the position. Does that make sense to you?
Dallas Crawford's a guy who moved from cornerback to running back. How do you think he's in the spring, and do you expect him to stay at running back?
You know what? I think what he had to deal with in the spring, learning 2 positions, I thought he did a good job. And that's not easy. What he had to do, and it afforded us a luxury in order, because the numbers were down. Didn't have a lot of receivers, didn't have a lot of running backs in the spring. So him doing it was big time. It was very unselfish move.
Do you expect him to stay there as the season starts, or is that still up in the air?
I expect him to still, learn both positions. you know, they play both positions, you know, based on needs.
When a kid learns to, whether or not he ends up playing them both or not, just how much do you find that just makes him more complete, just gives him more understanding of what's going on?
Exactly. I mean, you can give them a bigger, broader perspective of, you know, the offense as a whole. It also makes him more marketable, you know, from an individual standpoint.
So you just talk about what you liked about him when you're recruiting, just player-wise, what he does well.
But Duke is what I call a creative runner. You know, there's so many different things he does with the football in order to make plays. He's tougher than you think because of his size, but he's very tough. He has a good base on him, you know, where he can take hits and break tackles, you know, from that standpoint. I think he's a football guy. The game comes naturally to him. You know, I see that, you know, and just talking to him and dealing with him. So I'm excited about it, you know. And the biggest thing is now that he's here, he's enrolled in classes, he's just got to, you know, earn everything he gets.
How do you see him working in? I know it's early, but working in with Mike James and Eduardo Clemens in this offense. What's your kind of your vision for this position?
Well, it depends on how much he can handle. Right now, you know, until he can prove it, I don't see him, carrying the ball 30 times a game. Right now as a true freshman, and we're just going to work him in slowly, see how much he progresses, and see how much he retains, and we'll just go from there.
Having a guy like Mike, how much does that help just Duke as well? He can look up to a guy like Mike who works every day.
Right.
One of the best workers on the team.
Yeah. Mike is one of the best workers on the team. You know, he's a jack of all trades. You know, he does a lot of things well. He'll be an excellent role model. You know, he's very unselfish. I think if Duke was to ask him a question, Danny Dillard, any young tailback could ask him a question, you know, on how to get this done or whatever. We call it PCP, players coaching players. You know, he would tell them, he would give them his all in order to, help them, progress.
Jill, what did you see from Mike maybe different going into the spring, that it's going to be relied on more?
Mike, his feet are quicker. I think he's faster. You know, he has a better understanding. What we're doing, from offensive scheme, the totality of the whole scheme. And I just see a hunger in him, a level of focus that I haven't seen, in the past.
And you think that's from knowing his chance you guys are going to really
Yeah, I mean that's that's what Mike wants. He wants to be the guy, he's putting in the work, on and off the field, in the weight room and meetings, and even when he gets on the field, like I say, he's practicing hard, he's working hard, he's showing his toughness, in short yardage situation, goal line situation, and just running the football in general. I have nothing but positive things to say about it.